Hey, I'm Neil, and I've been working with Steadicam systems for over 20 years. In this video, we're going to talk about getting started with the Steadicam Axis. In the Introduction to Steadicam Axis video, I talked about what was included in the system and a bit about what's possible. In this video, I'm going to focus on some of the basics of setting up and operating. The first step of putting any camera on a Steadicam is attaching your camera plate. Generally, you want to think about what the center of gravity of the camera is and locate the plate right there. When you're mounting the camera on the axis, you're going to slide in like this and you'll hear a click right there. And that's a safety stop that's now engaged, and I'm not able to get the camera out. If I want to remove the camera, I need to push and hold this button, and now I can slide the camera out. Once again, going in, there's a click, it's in there, but if I want to hold the camera in this position, I move this latch over like this, and now it's locked and not going anywhere. At this time, I want to go ahead and plug in my video cable, and then I'm going to plug in this power cable. What's cool about this is, because I have a power cable in here, I can power this camera with this battery down below. This means less weight overall, because I've effectively made the camera lighter, so I don't need more weight down here to balance. One thing I really like about the Axis is how customizable and versatile this is. I can loosen these knobs, and now this clamp is released, and I can control where my monitor and battery rods go. In addition to that, both the monitor and battery mounts swivel like this. So I've got a huge range of options of how I configure this. You see, I've got weights here mounted to the monitor. That's helping me balance this relatively light monitor against this heavier battery. What all this means for me as an operator is I have options. If I get into a tight space, if I have a heavier camera, I can configure the system however I want to help me achieve different shots. Now that I have my camera mounted, my cables plugged in, my monitor, my battery are exactly where I want them to be, I just want to make sure that my gimbal cable is plugged in and I can work on balancing the sled. So Tyson here is going to lower the stand for me. That's perfect. And spin the dock around so that I can access this balancing stud. So I want to take the gimbal and insert it onto that stud. Make sure that I'm over a leg so it's nice and safe. I've got a lot of options to balance the camera. I've got a gross fore-aft adjustment that I can do, a big one, where I can open this latch here and I can slide the camera quite a lot. So I'm going to find a rough, good place to be, and then I'm going to lock it off so it's safe. For fine fore-aft adjustment, you see I've got a little scale here, and I have one knob in the back that I can turn to balance the sled. For side-to-side balancing, I have a knob on either side of the stage here. So it's really handy. Whatever side of the camera I'm on, I can just reach over and balance the side-to-side. That's really nice. For top-to-bottom adjustment, I've got two options. I can actually lengthen the overall rig by opening this clamp here. The rig gets longer. But for me right now, I'm going to play it short. So I'm going to shorten it all the way back up, and always remember to lock it. That's safe. But then I can also move the gimbal. I've got all this travel on this post to move this gimbal. So I'm going to open the clamp, always make sure the sled is horizontal when you open it, and I can kind of scoot like this until I find just the right amount of bottom heaviness. When you're working with the Axis, always make sure that this little notch on the back of the gimbal here lines up with this yellow line. That's going to keep the volt calibrated. Normally with the Steadicam, I'd like to leave some bottom heaviness. But because I'm using a volt, I'm actually going to go neutral, where the relationship between above the gimbal and below the gimbal is the same. So I'm just going to find that neutral point by gently scooting the gimbal, keeping it lined up, and we're neutral. Now that I'm balanced and the sled is neutral, I can turn on the system. And because I've lined up this notch with this yellow line, the volt is already calibrated and I don't have to worry about it. What I need to do is reach over to this pause button and just take it out of pause. And it's immediately going to start working to help me stabilize the sled. What you see here are 4 dials: pan, tilt, roll, and damp. What this is going to allow me to do is tune the volt specifically to help me on different shots that I encounter. So here with pan, as I turn this up, it's increasing the amount of strength in this pan motor. So that's going to do a lot to help this camera feel like a big, heavy cinema camera. Now, if I'm being really aggressive and panning around all over the place, I might turn this pan strength down so that I can manipulate the sled a little more. It's a similar deal with tilt. As I turn this knob, I'm increasing the strength of these motors on the tilt axis. So it's going to resist me more as I tilt. Why might I want to do this? Well, I can reach over and push my thumb button, and now I've locked in this tilt position, and the sled is going to work harder to hold that tilt angle. This is super helpful if I'm ever running backwards and having to land a mark and tilt and find a particular frame. I can go to my end mark, push this button to set my angle, and now I'm starting at my first position. I'm running backwards and kind of relaxing my hand, and the volt will help guide me to my mark. In heavy winds, I might just go over into sticky mode. That's a long press on the thumb button. And now, as I change the tilt strength, it's kind of like adding drag to a fluid head. The sled is going to stay wherever I leave it, but it's going to resist me more. It's a similar situation with roll. As I add more roll strength, the sled is going to resist more and more going off level. If I do go off level, it's going to work harder and harder to get back to a level position. The last dial on here is damp. What damping controls is how aggressively the Steadicam wants to come to a stop. To illustrate this, I'm going to come out of sticky mode. I know I'm in sticky mode because this LED is blinking. If I do a long press on my thumb button again, now the light is solid and I know I'm not in sticky mode, I'm in normal mode. Now when I tilt and let go, the rig's trying to come back to that home base, but with no damping, it's going to swing through that position over and over. But if I want to tilt and stop really aggressively, I'm going to turn my damping up. So now when I tilt and let go, the rig is going to stop, which is super helpful for hitting specific marks. Now, before you get started, you want to take some time and really make sure that the vest is properly fitted to you, that it's symmetrical, that it's snug, that it's comfortable. After you've done that, you can put on the arm, get it tuned up properly, make sure that it's working together, and now you're ready to go. So now let's talk about some operating styles and how you might tune this system to help you out with certain shots. One of the hardest things that we're asked to do as Steadicam operators is whip pans. What's great about the Steadicam Axis is I can tune the volt to help me so that the whip pans aren't all that scary anymore. One thing I'm going to think about doing if I'm getting ready to make a whip pan with this is I'm going to set my tilt and roll so that they're tuned similarly. But then the really cool thing is I now have the pan axis. So when I want to whip pan, I can turn the strength up and it makes the camera feel really big, so that when I land that whip, it's going to stop. What's so exciting about this is that I, for the first time as an operator, have control over how the camera feels just by turning a knob. Another reason that I might increase the strength of all my dials overall is if I ever find myself in a situation with heavy winds. With the Axis and this new 3-axis volt, I can really lean into these motors helping me out, and it's literally as simple as me reaching over and turning the strength up like this. If the camera ever has to move backwards pretty quickly, I don't like to run backwards. I can't go as fast and it's kind of dangerous. What I like is to put the camera into Don Juan like this, where the camera's now shooting over my shoulder, pointed backwards. I can go this way, I can see where I'm going, and it's safe. A lot of people will avoid Don Juan because it's much harder to do. Your horizon's all backward and it's really hard to keep the camera level. With the Volt, it's now really no problem. Now let's talk about landing a big tilt. This is really challenging, especially if you're working with someone who really wants you to land a very specific frame. If you're coming up to something or coming down from something, what I like to do is find my end frame, push my button, and now the Volt has a mark, and it's going to try to encourage me into that mark. So if I'm tilting up off some footprints in the sand or something and trying to land an exact close-up on somebody, now the Volt is helping me find that frame and I really don't have to worry about it. I learned to operate on smaller Steadicams, and I was always scared of going on very long lenses because I didn't have a lot of inertia to work with to slow down my twitchy long lens. It's so exciting now that I can go back to a small Steadicam and fearlessly operate above 100 millimeters. One of the most challenging things we can do as Steadicam operators is stairs. Not only is it physically demanding, but it's really tricky. The headroom is often changing, and you're having to focus more on where you're going than the shot itself. So now I can use a lighter system, and I can lean into the Volt to really help me here. So if we're going down a long flight of stairs, me and an actor, I can set a frame with my button here, turn up the tilt strength a little bit, and let it help me hold that frame. Low mode has never been easier for us. Now with this system, I can push the lens lower, and I know that my horizon's going to be taken care of, and I can tilt easier. I hope this video helps you get started with the Steadicam Axis, and that it's just the beginning of your Steadicam journey. On a personal note, I'm always working to hone my skills. I work in episodic television, but anytime I'm not on the job, I'm practicing. So I encourage you to continue your Steadicam education.